In the cold, clinical rhythm of the business world, Hendrik was a man of logic and logistics. He was a dealer of rinds and textures, a cheese importer in The Hague who understood the exact weight of a wheel of Gouda and the precise shelf life of a brie. For decades, his world was one of commerce, a series of transactions that kept the lights on and the stomach full. But there is a particular kind of madness that settles into a man when he realizes that his life is being measured in inventory rather than in light. In 1995, at the age of 40, that precarious bridge where the past feels heavy and the future looks like a narrowing hallway, Hendrik stepped off the ledge. He didn't just quit his job, he swapped lives with his wife, Anna. In a reversal of the traditional Dutch domestic tapestry, she went out to conquer the workforce, and he retreated into the house. He became the keeper of the hearth, the maker of meals, and the guardian of their young daughter Paula. It was a quiet revolution. There were no fanfare or manifestos, just a man in a kitchen in Amsterdam, surrounded by the mundane clutter of fatherhood. To keep his sanity, he turned to two things: the visceral, tactile art of cooking and the silent, unblinking eye of a camera. He was entirely self-taught, a rogue element in the world of high art. He didn't want an academy. He wanted a conversation with the ghosts of the North. He began to read. He read until the history of the Dutch Golden Age seeped into his marrow, and then he looked at his daughter. At first, the photographs were just a father's frantic attempt to catch water in a sieve. He photographed Paula's sunburn, the angry peeling red of a summer afternoon. He photographed her in the bath, her skin slick and vulnerable. He was recording the terrifying speed of childhood, the way a person can change between breakfast and dinner. But the transition from dad with a camera to artist with a vision happened on a day that smelled of horses and damp earth. Paula had come home from horseback riding. She pulled off her helmet, and there it was, a simple hairnet, pressing her hair into a precise geometric shape. In the specific, slanted light of their home, Hendrik didn't see a little girl coming home from a hobby. He saw a ghost from the 17th century. He saw the silent teachers, the Vermeers and the Rembrandts, whispering from across the centuries. He realized then that the Dutch master look wasn't a dead style trapped in a museum. It was a DNA strain, a way of seeing the world that was still very much alive in the faces of his kin. This was the birth of a long, obsessive collaboration. For over 25 years, Paula would remain his singular muse. But this wasn't the typical creepy dynamic of an artist and a passive model. As she grew, she became a collaborator, then an art historian in her own right, and eventually the architect of their shared legacy. They became a family firm, a magical bubble that operated outside the vulgarity of the art market. Hendrik didn't want to talk about prices or galleries. He wanted to talk about the surface. In the Italian Renaissance, paintings were windows into stories. Saints being martyred, gods descending from clouds. But the Dutch, Hendrik's people, were different. They were obsessed with the surface. They wanted to describe the exact way light died on a piece of velvet or how a drop of dew sat on a petal. Hendrik embraced this with a dark, almost absurdist humor. He looked at the waste of the modern world, the plastic bags, the bubble wrap, the aluminum foil, and saw the lace ruffs and silk turbans of the 1600s. There is a biting irony in his most famous image. It features a white plastic grocery bag, the kind that litters the oceans and chokes the soil, draped over Paula's head. With the right lighting and a certain tilt of the chin, this piece of garbage becomes a majestic, translucent hood. It is beautiful and it is horrifying. It is a commentary on global warming, on the permanence of our waste, and the transience of our beauty. Hendrik realized that if you treat a trash bag with the same reverence that Vermeer treated a pearl, you reveal something deeply uncomfortable about the human condition. His studio became a laboratory of the absurd. He would take a roll of toilet paper and wind it around Paula's neck until she looked like a high-born lady from the era of the tulip mania. He would use a lampshade, a napkin, or a beer can to mimic the fashion of an age when the Netherlands was the center of the world. It was a form of time travel. He was using the binary language of the digital camera to compete with the non-binary freedom of the painter's brush. He once became obsessed with a 15th century portrait of a man in a red turban. He tried to recreate the folds of that fabric, but he found it was impossible. The original painter had cheated, and he had used the freedom of the brush to create shapes that couldn't exist in three-dimensional reality. Hendrik's response was a masterpiece of digital alchemy. He didn't just take one photo, he took dozens. He photographed the material, the girl, the shadows, and then he mashed them together in a computer, creating a trompe-l'oeil for the 21st century. It was an image that felt more real than reality, a phantom garment that existed only in the space between the lens and the screen. The dark humor of his work lies in the tension between the high and the low. There is something inherently funny, almost perverse, about a grown man spending hours meticulously arranging bubble wrap on his daughter's head. It is a labor of love that borders on the pathological. Yet, when you look at the final result, the humor fades into a profound silence. You aren't looking at a girl in a bubble wrap hat. You are looking at the eternal other. You are looking at the way light defines a human face, regardless of whether that face is framed by silk or by plastic. As the years passed, the project took on a feminist weight. Hendrik, a man surrounded by women, his wife, his daughter, and eventually his grandson, began to question the history books. He looked at the old masters and wondered where the women were. Why were they always the subjects, the muses, the silent ones, and never the creators? He began to see his work as a way to give Paula agency. In his portraits, she doesn't look like a passive victim of the male gaze. She looks like she is daring the viewer to look away. She is fierce, composed, and increasingly, she is the one holding the intellectual reins of the project. Their life together is a magical family bubble. They live in a house where the 17th century and the 21st century are constantly colliding. One floor might be filled with the smell of a slow-cooked Dutch stew, while the next floor is filled with 3D scanners and high-end printers. Hendrik is currently exploring the idea of turning his two-dimensional portraits into three-dimensional sculptures, merging photography with clay. He wants to see the back of the person, a feat that traditionally photography has always denied us. This is not a story of a career. It is a story of a devotion. It is about a man who realized that the most important thing he could do with his life was to sit in a quiet room with his daughter and watch the light change. It is about the silent teachers who tell us that everything, even a piece of aluminum foil, is worthy of being immortalized if you look at it long enough. Hendrik Kerstens didn't just become a photographer, he became a guardian of the Dutch light. He proved that you don't need a fancy academy or a trunk full of silk to create something that will last for centuries. all you need is a willing subject, a bit of dark humor, and the courage to see the masterpiece hiding inside a plastic bag. His journey is a reminder that it is never too late to trade the cheese for the camera. It is never too late to stop counting wheels of Gouda and start counting the shadows on a human face. In the end, we are all just surfaces waiting for the right light to find us.